Is Alcoholics Anonymous really a support group that will help you recover from alcohol addiction, or has it become a cult? Stay tuned and I'll tell you why I think it is the latter. I have declared quite adamantly that the support group, Alcoholics Anonymous, isn't as much of a support group as a cult. The organization may have not started as a cult in Bill and Bob's original initiation of it, but it has certainly evolved into one over the last century. And worst yet, they are a cult with a tremendous failure rate to keep their own members sober. I would contend that if they would stop engaging in cult tactics and alter their program to a method of global holistic recovery, that the organization would have much better results than it does. But why do I refer to them as a cult? One of my other endeavors as a non-specified theist, closer to the Jewish faith more than anything else, was a channel debunking the beliefs of Christian fundamentalists. In this content, I investigated a great deal into their claims of the young earth only being 4,000 years old and the global flood in the time of Noah. One of my episodes on the almighty YouTube also referred to the specific type of Christian as a cult member and listed the signs of a cult, which do largely resemble those of fundamentalist churches. The exact signs can also be directed to Alcoholics Anonymous. I have been to a few of their meetings long ago and found that the mantras, peer pressure, and mindset are not much different than the Christian fundamentalists, who I am well familiar with over my almost 6 decades on this terrain. Any Google search will reveal that the symptoms of belonging to a cult are identical no matter what the organization is. A cult indoctrinates a member whose origin is one of weakness or dysfunction in his life. For people who have their world together and are self-assured, do not belong to cults. This is true for fundamentalist churches as well. People who are capable of thinking for themselves and do not follow the rest of the sheep generally will not be found in their Sunday services. AA indoctrinates the person at the height of his dysfunction and weakness, when he's in the initial stages of withdrawal. None of us were strong when we are engaged in the addiction, and we are at our lowest during those first 2 phases, which last typically 30 to 45 days after the last drink. And the emotional effects of even up to those first 6 months can be severe in the 3rd phase of recovery. At that time, we are in a picture-perfect place for the brainwashing to begin, and if we enter AA's doors unaware of these cult signs, there is a significant chance we could result in his mental prison for good, never realizing the cult symptoms were there at all. The first sign of a cult is one of authoritarianism. Total authority, yet lacking the accountability of outcomes. You will experience this in any fundamentalist type church. The other members will begin with friendliness toward the new recruit. That geniality will fade if they suspect you aren't buying into their doctrine. And this is the exact scenario of the AA organization. The warm, quote, support will last only until you question this absolute authority. I was 11 months clean before I stepped into an AA meeting. I went to 2 meetings in 2 different locations in 2 weeks, largely to see if they had anything to offer, as I was still in a long, protracted withdrawal phase that lasts up to the 2-year mark, the point where the neurochemistry has finally rebalanced itself. A milepost where I state the former alcoholic can claim cure, which is heresy to the AA mantra. One of the group sponsors was addressing the circle. He stated loudly and boldly that AA was the only way to sobriety, largely like that pastor at the pulpit whose members kneel to his wizened authority. If one didn't believe AA was the only way, then you would hear a cry of accusation for swimming in that river in Egypt. You are in denial. Denial of your condition. Denial of your, quote, disease. Denial that you will always be an addict. But yet, they do not acknowledge that most sources state they have a 60 to 80% failure rate. That would be the lack of accountability, one of the definitions of a cult. The fact is, most fail in the AA program. Now, the AA pundits will state the reason people fail isn't their program. It's the person hasn't hit rock bottom yet. He wasn't working the steps. That person was still swimming in that river in Egypt. To which I would respond, all 60 to 80% of them? Or maybe is it that your program just doesn't work for most AA, and the ones who do stay sober are now imprisoned in your rooms of your absolute authority for life? Which leads to the next sign that you're in a cult. Unreasonable fears of the outside world. The outside world being one without AA. The fundamentalist church will try to keep its members, especially its youth, far away from non-fundamentalists. They have youth groups like Horizons, which teenagers flock to when not in Sunday service or Bible study. Many parents homeschool their children so they can negate without interference all that science stuff. It's the same in AA. If it wasn't, then why are people still in the rooms 5 and 6 nights a week at 10 years sober? That is insane. For that protracted rebalancing phase has long concluded. Those people should be living on their own now. But they have that instilled fear that if they leave the rooms, John Barleycorn is waiting around the corner to recapture their souls. The people still sitting in the rooms after years of sobriety, they no longer have an addiction problem. They now have a psyche problem. They are now emotionally addicted to AA. The third sign of a cult is zero tolerance for criticism. Have you ever tried to show the conclusive scientific fact that there was no global flood to a Christian fundamentalist? The reaction is a snarl, in which they repeatedly point to their zealot scientists who aren't using science at all, who attempt to demonstrate there certainly was that ark that survived it. It's the exact same mentality that an AA member spews. I experienced this more than once in my first 5 years sober. In my first 30 days, I periodically went to an online AA chat room, largely to ask how long the withdrawal symptoms I felt would last. When I hit the 45-day mark, the first day I could actually say I felt good, I happened to add on the screen that I wasn't in AA. Did anyone on that screen congratulate me for making it past what I consider phase 2 in recovery? No. The screen erupted with condemnation. You can't do this alone. AA's the only way. You need to start the steps. On and on. I wasn't even criticizing them at the time. The only critique was I wasn't doing it their way. At 5 years, when writing my recovery book, a woman saw a reference on the coffee shop table and came over. She was a former alcoholic who asked me what room I went to, and I told her I didn't do AA. Her response? That same snarl. AA teaches you how to live. You have to learn how to live without alcohol. I thought I was doing pretty well. I kept a fitness program 5 days a week, clean diet, not smoking, hiking the big trails, and taking a shot as a writer while growing my investments. But even at 5 years sober, the AA proponents consider it a direct attack that you did it without the rooms. I'm near 17 years sober today, but if you look at the comments on some of these episodes, you will see the same snarl from the AA community. You're just a dry drunk. You were never a real alcoholic. Your life is still incomplete. You're full of nothing but IMSs. The reaction one would expect of a cult. Just like the fundamentalist church's response. You weren't ever a real Christian. You're headed to hell. Your life is a void. Different cult with the same symptoms. Another sign that you belong to a cult is the leaders are always in the right and exclusive in knowing the truth. The leaders of Alcoholics Anonymous are the big book, the 12 steps, the senior members in the circle, and, of course, the ever and all-knowing sponsor. In the fundamentalist church, it is the same structure. If you happen to be a younger member, the hierarchy is pastor, parents, and everyone senior to yourself. They have absolute knowledge and no tolerance for dissent. They ignore differing opinion of their worldview, even if you place absolute evidence right in front of them. Have you ever tried this with a Christian fundamentalist? You show them a fossil record that conclusively demonstrates that whales evolved from animals that spent part of their time on land. The devil's trying to mislead you. It's the same in an AA meeting. In my first of 2 AA encounters, when it was my time in the circle to share, I stated I was a former alcoholic on my way to cure, was 11 months clean, and had never been to a meeting. You could hear a pin drop. One of the senior members later confronted me that no one is a former alcoholic. I reiterated I was and would claim complete cure in a year. Did this senior member of 25 years sobriety even consider this fact? My sobriety gained by not going to AA versus the majority failure rate of those who did? Of course not. He is now a leader in the cult hierarchy. Someone who spends the majority of his long sober life still in AA. That's not the mentality of a support group that wants to benefit its members. That is a cult that only wants you to follow the rules established by that very cult. Another sign that you belong to a cult is the reaction when one of its followers leave it. I have known of a significant number of former addicts who left AA. One was my brother, who stayed with them a few years after he quit the barley. Today, he's well over 20 years clean. Most atheists leave as AA indoctrinates religion, whether they want to admit it or not. As I showed in a previous article about the 12 steps, 7 are oriented around God, and others walk out the door simply because they recognize the cult signs just like I did. But the same snarl is given for leaving as is for critiquing their methods. In a fundamentalist church, if one rejects their philosophy and exits, he will lose friends and possibly even family. They will regard him as fallen and turn their backs on him as that condemned sinner who just opened the path that will walk him to hell. Same in AA. Never have I been congratulated by an AA member for my now long sobriety. I've been told I'm just a dry drunk. Yet my life is fulfilled, and theirs is sitting in the rooms every night, smoking cigarettes and rehashing over and over their stories of the days deep in John Barleycorn's bottle. And they have to justify their prison by raging because you live outside of its walls. Just like a cult member, Alcoholics Anonymous would wholly deny that my accusation that they are a cult is legitimate. Again, just look at some of the comments from the proponents of AA who happen to fall on some of my episodes. Cult members are not known for living in reality. They will state that AA has helped people across the country stay sober. That is incorrect, AA. First, your cult fails the majority who step inside your doors. There is a growing movement of non-12-step programs across the country that have far better results than the AA protocol. Not just by beating the addiction to alcoholism, but holistically healing the person in every plane. And as far as the very minority who do stay sober in the AA program, they may not drink any longer, but you certainly have not helped them. They are mentally trapped in your rooms. They are afraid to go out on their own outside of your doors. Most are not physically healthy, ingesting caffeine and nicotine every night just to get through your highly negative meetings. They lost alcohol addiction and now have a new addiction. Their drug is now Alcoholics Anonymous. They will state, AA is the most successful program to address alcoholism. Again, address your failure rate. There is one study they harp on from Stanford whose results greatly differ from basically everyone else's statistics. And I greatly question the sample taken from that study and its metrics. Again, you are not mostly successful, AA. You fail most of the time. And a sure sign of a cult is one which won't acknowledge its actual poor outcomes. They will state that I was never a real alcoholic. I once got that on a comment from a motivational channel which I had a few episodes on beating addiction. I'm 155 pounds at 5'6". I was drinking 3 and sometimes 4 cases of beer a week in the end days of my addiction. I was drinking literally continuously through the weekends. Are you serious? They will state, your life will never be complete without AA. Sure, let's look at my life and one of your typical members. Mine consists of high-level fitness, healthy diet, and no toxic additives. I hike the mountains all over the world. I'm 80% retired in my 50s. I continue endeavors like these episodes, have written 5 books, and have become savvy in short and long-term investing, which only gives me more financial freedom than I already have, versus the AA member sitting in the rooms most nights with years of sobriety, the minority who do stay sober for years. I can only attribute this obvious comparative difference to my life and the AA members to the fact that I have engaged in a holistic recovery program that led to cure, and they joined a cult. And no cult is healthy, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. If AA really wants to have a significant outcome to help its members gain sobriety, they must completely transform their program from a cult to an avenue to help its members heal themselves so they can continue their now sober lives on their own. They must teach their members to regain their lives by reinventing them. But a cult not only resists change, it is adamantly opposed to it because they are so indoctrinated with themselves, they can't even see what they are. And as long as this blindness remains, so will their rates of largely failure. Now, if you want some other reasons why AA is destructive for you, check out my playlist card at the end of the video. And check out my own detailed book on the matter, The Small Book, How I Beat Alcoholism and Why Alcoholics Anonymous Doesn't Work. Link is on the video description as well as the channel page banner. And remember, keep your contract. Be sober at sundown, and I will see you at the next sunrise.